Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight,
it's life-threatening for me, and I'm not going to go take it unless there's significant medical support.
What to do about fears of vaccine allergies.
Sorry about that, Brandis. COVID vaccines coming to a downtown building near you. That and more from Cranes.
Forecasters are projecting we'll see the fastest economic growth in nearly 40 years.
Strong economic growth, but after a disappointing jobs report, is there a mismatch between jobs available and the skills of workers?
Why some lawmakers want to block state financing for a proposed South Loop megadevelopment.
Local efforts to support people in India affected by the country's massive COVID-19 outbreak.
I can assure you that what you will observe is a vast wasteland.
Is television still a vast wasteland? We check in with a former chairman of the Federal Communications Commission on the state of the media.
We're a brewery, a bakery, a pizza place, a grocery store now, all sorts of things.
And a sampling of some of the vendors taking part in the Logan Square Farmers Market. But first, some of today's top stories. As Illinois marches toward a complete reopening in a few weeks, public health officials are working to make it easier for downtown workers and some in the suburbs to have access to the COVID-19 vaccine. The state is partnering with local unions and the Building Owners and Managers Association to encourage front desk staff, custodians, building security, and other workers who've been working in office buildings during the pandemic to get the vaccine at clinics that are now being set up in several downtown buildings, including the Merchandise Mart, the Wrigley Building, and others.
This is about making it as easy as possible for those who have not yet gotten vaccinated to do so. Vaccines are not only incredibly effective and protective for the person who gets them, but just as importantly, vaccines also make the whole community safer.
And we'll have more on this effort and other business headlines from Cranes later in the program. Illinois public health officials report 1,400 new cases of the coronavirus and 12 additional deaths. The state's total case count is more than 1.356 million, and 22,235 people have died. The state's test positivity rate is 3.4%, down from 4% a week ago. 81-year-old German architect Helmut Jahn, best known in Chicago for designing the James R. Thompson Center in the Loop, was killed in a bicycle crash over the weekend. Jahn moved to Chicago in the 60s to study under legendary architect Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, Then later he went on to work on major projects including Chicago's McCormick Place, the United Airlines terminal at O'Hare Airport, and the FBI headquarters, the J. Edgar Hoover Building in Washington, D.C. He appeared on Chicago Tonight in 2003, where, among other topics, he discussed what makes a good architect.
He has to get along with the contractor. He has to be sometimes a politician. And he has to be sometimes tough, because only this way a vision, and a good building always starts with a vision, can be realized.
And the Thompson Center, which went on sale last week, has been even more controversial as of late. State officials say the 17-story building has been a drain on state finances because it's inefficient to operate and in need of hundreds of millions of dollars in repairs. Preservationists have been working to protect the building from significant alterations or from being demolished. The proposed megadevelopment One Central would create residential, retail, parkland, and a transit hub on top of the Metro tracks just west of Soldier Field. The splashy $20 billion plan has gotten lots of attention, including for its reliance on $6.5 billion in state financing. Some lawmakers say the language that made the financing possible was snuck into last year's state budget, and one of them wants to put a stop to that portion of the plan. Joining us now are State Representative Cam Buckner, a Democrat from Chicago, who just introduced a bill to block state financing for One Central, and Jack Lavin, President and CEO of the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce and a supporter of the One Central development. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Representative Buckner, let's start with you, please. Why do you want to block state funding for this particular project?
Yeah, thank you, Brandis. Most simply put, my issue is not with the proposal. It is with the process and the priorities. The bill that I filed to amend the State Finance Act and repeal the provisions that created the Civic and Transit Infrastructure Fund that will be used by this One Central proposal. It's really about making sure that we are having intentional conversations about what this means from a financial standpoint. This was a $6.5 billion golden ticket that was thrown over the transom in the 2019 budget implementation bill without any real background, really any real conversations being had with those of us who represent the area. And so as we look at the precariousness of this new state budget, the things that have happened since COVID became an issue, we have to figure out if this is something that the state can afford and if it's something that's a priority for all of us.
And Jack Lavin, what is your reaction to that bill?
Well, Brandis, thank you for having me. I was a little surprised. I understand what Representative Buckner is saying. I think this project is a tremendous opportunity for Chicago. It can generate over the next 40 years $150 billion of revenue and 70,000 jobs. Right now, that land produces $23,000 of property taxes. So it's a tremendous opportunity. There's a process that's going on right now. It won't be built for a few years. But what I liked about the legislation is it was a public-private partnership for the state of Illinois. The state has not done too many of these. The private money is up front and not a dime comes out from the state till the project is completed. So there's a process to go. It's still happening, but I think this is a great opportunity. It's a unique public-private partnership that the state of Illinois is doing for an opportunity to build a gateway to the South Side and create jobs and connect South Side neighborhoods to the central business district.
And Representative Buckner, have you gotten reaction to your legislation, to your bill from Governor Pritzker, your colleagues in Springfield?
So I've spoken to a number of my colleagues who are excited about the fact that this was on the table. I've not spoken to the governor personally about this, but the governor has come out publicly as he's talked about the ensuing budget that we will pass in the next couple of weeks here in Springfield. And he has really indicated that this is not a priority of his. I've gotten widespread support from colleagues across the aisle, across the state about this, because what also is important to know about this from a financial standpoint, this isn't a typical, TIF type of deal where there's a value capture based on a geographic area. This would be sales tax coming to this project from every region of the state. All right. And so when we look at, once again, where we are as a state, the things that we need to focus on to make sure that we are moving forward in a hopefully post-pandemic world, we've got to have these conversations.
Jack Lavin, what would the state financing go toward?
The state financing would go towards a transit hub, a civic build that brings National Rail, Amtrak, Metra, CTA together in one place. It builds that civic build, a transit hub. Transportation studies, transit studies, market studies have been done to show that this will work. It connects the South Side neighborhoods to the central business district. There's a rail yard there. It's a barrier to opportunity. It's a barrier to the South Side connecting with the central business district and creating jobs, lowering commute times. That's what creates jobs and helps people get to jobs. And I think in response to Representative Buckner, one of the things about this public-private partnership, it is not TIF dollars. The money that the state puts in, they get back. I think it's in 20 years. So they own the asset at the end. TIF dollars, typically, that does not happen. They own the asset, and they can use it for their unfunded pension liability. They could transfer the assets into there. That is, I think, when the legislation passed, that was one of the benefits of it that I think when the General Assembly and the governor passed it and the governor signed the bill, that was one of the unique parts of this public-private partnership.
And Jack, how much does the developer need this money? Can a mega project like this get off the ground without state funding to back it up?
I think these large projects, especially this one, when we built Millennium Park, we built a tabletop over that rail yard to build Millennium Park. Look at the return on investment at Millennium Park and what tourism brings to the city of Chicago and state of Illinois. It's the same issue here. You have a rail yard. You need to build infrastructure over it. All these big projects require some infrastructure. Others have gotten TIF dollars. This had a unique public-private partnership with the state where the state takes ownership of the asset at the end of the 20 years. And that's unique in that they're getting their money back. They're getting a return on investment. They're getting an asset they can put into their unfunded pension liability.
Representative Buckner, you've also said that there needs to be more analysis, or that you'd like to see more analysis of how necessary this is. Would you consider backing state financing for this project if there were changes to it, or if there were more analysis of the transportation impact?
That's one of the biggest things that I've talked about, is making sure that we have more thorough, intentional, independent analysis of what this means, both from a, this is about transportation, about equity, about air pollution, about traffic, about all those things that would be important for this. I think we have to have those conversations. And as we talk about transit, there's nobody who wants the South Side to be connected to the Central Business District more than I. I live on the South Side. I'm from the South Side. I represent much of the South Side and downtown as well. We should be concentrating energy, though, on sustaining, improving, and coordinating our existing transit system. So what I'm looking for is more clarity on why this is needed and what it looks like. Brandis, I'll tell you, growing up as a kid, I had a math teacher who was infamous for putting "show your work" on top of a math assignment. If you had the right answer, but the process didn't make sense, he was more concerned with the process than the answer, because that was important. All we're asking is to show your work.
Are you concerned at all?
Brandis,
go ahead, Jack.
And Brandis, they are in a process with the city of Chicago. Before they can go back to the state and negotiate the final public-private partnership agreement, they've got to go through the plan development process at the city. They submitted the transportation study, the transit study, the market study, all the things that Representative Buckner is mentioning. And I don't know if those are public or will become public soon. The plan development process is beginning. When that happens, I'm sure all this information will be public. I know there's been a number of community meetings, and I have great respect for Representative Buckner. This is a process, and we got to have that information.
Before I let you both go, Representative Buckner, I just want to ask, is there any concern that by blocking the state financing, that could nix the entire project? In 25 seconds.
No, I hope that this can move us to a spot where we can have, once again, these more intentional conversations. $6.5 billion is real money, Brandis. I think we all know that. We have passed a number of bills in the last few years that make neighborhoods stronger and safer and put dollars in education. And the question we always get is, where will the money come from? However, that didn't seem to be a question for the mega project. So we need to see where our priorities are and figure out what's important to us.
Okay, more to come on this, I'm sure. My thanks to Representative Cam Buckner and Jack Lavin for joining us.
Great. Thank you, Brandis.
Thank you.
And now to Paris, and details on what may be driving vaccine hesitancy for some Americans. Paris.
Yeah, Brandis, demand for the COVID vaccine is suddenly dropping, and as a result, states are requesting less than their normal allocations. This as there is still a large population hesitant to get the vaccine. Now, some of that might be political or the result of misinformation. Others are basing their hesitancy on fears of an allergic reaction. We met one Chicagoan who says she has good reason to hold out. Chicago resident Donna Prestel says she wants to get the COVID-19 vaccine, but she refuses to at this point because of a history of allergic reactions.
I have significant allergic response to medications and anesthesias.
Prestel says she's allergic to polyethylene glycol, a compound found in both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. She says she's also allergic to polysorbate 80, a compound in the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. The CDC recommends that patients with those allergies not get those shots.
It's life-threatening for me, and I'm not going to go take it unless there's significant medical support.
There's a lot of nuance with allergy, and I would hate for it to be a misunderstanding of what exactly had happened in the past, and that result in someone who wants to get vaccinated missing out on the vaccine.
Dr. Anna Wolfson is an allergist with Massachusetts General Hospital. She says those particular allergies are uncommon and recommends that patients get an allergy test before determining whether or not to get the vaccine.
If the allergic reaction happened decades ago and no records are available, we can do this testing to see if that's still an allergy.
An early CDC analysis found extremely rare cases of anaphylaxis after taking one of the mRNA vaccines. The rate was 2.5 per million in Moderna and 11 per million in Pfizer. But that doesn't ease Prestel's concerns.
I understand statistics. The problem is, it only matters if you're not that person.
So you're worried that you could be one of those?
Well, of course.
Prestel says she's willing to take the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, but only in an advanced clinical setting like a hospital. She says she has not been able to find an appointment that meets that criteria to this point. Dr. Robert Murphy leads the Institute for Global Health at Northwestern's Feinberg School of Medicine. He says there is far more flexibility to request a certain vaccine at a certain location now because of the current supply and demand situation.
There is more vaccine now than people willing to take the vaccine. So, those kind of issues where everything was so tight have really loosened up. And you can look around and find a particular place giving a vaccine, scheduled to give a vaccine on a certain day.
Which should make it easier for Prestel to find an appointment. Still, she says she wants public health officials to do more to cater to people with allergies, like setting aside special appointments with more emergency precautions.
I'm not the only person, and if the goal is to get everybody vaccinated, then this needs to happen.
To this date, the CDC reports no known deaths related to the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines and 3 possible deaths linked to Johnson & Johnson due to a rare blood clotting disease. The U.S. economy has come roaring back from pandemic lows, but a disappointing jobs report on Friday that fell far short of analyst predictions highlighted some potentially worrying trends. One of those is that with 8 million unfilled jobs, there's potentially a mismatch between available jobs and the skills of workers. And some workers appear simply reluctant to return. Here's a little bit of what President Joe Biden said today about those unfilled jobs.
We're going to make it clear that anyone collecting unemployment who is offered a suitable job must take the job or lose their unemployment benefits.
And joining us now to give their take on the economy and the pandemic's impacts on the workplace are Rebecca Ryan, economist and futurist and the founder of Next Generation Consulting, and Tom Gimbel, founder and CEO of LaSalle Network. That's a nationwide staffing, recruiting, and culture consulting firm based here in Chicago. Welcome back, both of you, to Chicago Tonight. Rebecca, I'll start with you. As an economist, you see these sort of varying sets of data. How would you characterize this job market right now, and what are your expectations?
Well, the most recent report was certainly disappointing, and I think there are 2 things going on. One is that there were structural problems with our job market before the pandemic, so we've got a huge middle skills gap, and that persists. But the second issue is this notion of people not being in a hurry to return to work, and I certainly think that wages can be part of the problem, but that's a very narrow slice. The other piece are whether workers feel safe going back to work, physically safe regarding COVID, and whether they're also thinking about switching careers. I think for some of these essential and key workers, this pandemic has raised some big questions about the kinds of work they want to be doing in the future.
So there's some headwinds here, but despite that, Tom Gimbel, you've said that this is the best job market you've seen in 25 years. At least there are jobs out there if there are people willing and skilled to be able to do them. So what counts here for the discrepancy?
There's a job out there for anybody who wants one. And while I agree with Rebecca on several of her points, it's not up for the government to support people while they're looking to do a career change on the unemployment side. So I agree that people may be looking for that, but that's not for the government, i.e. the taxpayer, to be supporting. What we're seeing right now is exactly what Rebecca said, and that is a huge skills gap, especially in the technology sector, healthcare, supply chain, where we just don't have people who have those skills. And I'm not sure that it's people who are afraid to come back to work. I think it's that cities haven't necessarily opened up fully. And when we see New York and Chicago opening up and other cities this summer, and then all the hospitality, the service workers, the restaurant folks can be back working, we'll see these numbers increase. And then we also have a full set of college students graduating in May, and we'll start to see that in the June and July numbers that really reflect what this economy is capable of from an employment area of specialization.
So, Rebecca Ryan, at least for that unemployment benefit part of it, you heard the president allude to this. Would it make a difference if some of those added benefits went away and they tightened the reins on unemployment?
I think it will for some sectors of employees, but we've all had a different experience during COVID, and there's not one silver bullet that's going to solve this.
Tom Gimbel, I did a report earlier alluding to a study from the design firm Gensler that said that they expect 70% of folks to go back to the workplace, at least for most of the week. Does that square with what you've been seeing?
Absolutely. we are going to see a new normal, which is a hybrid workforce. But whether a lot of people are thinking that'll be when the employee wants to, and I'm not hearing that or seeing that from the HR leaders and CEOs that I meet with. What we are hearing is that people are going to be coming back on a design plan somewhere between 3 and 4 days a week for the majority of companies, which would be 60 to 80%, which hits right in line with what Gensler's saying in their report. And I think people are going to still use a very similar size footprint because they want to have their people in the office at the same time.
Rebecca Ryan, what does that portend for the economy at large if that's what materializes? Folks in the office maybe 3-4 days a week, maybe remote 2-3 days a week?
I think there are two things we can point to longer term. One is an increase in productivity. We've made the case in COVID that we can keep and in some cases improve productivity even when people are not working in an office. So that's one of the benefits. But the other one is this: employers save on average $11,000 per employee when they allow workers to have the hybrid schedule that Tom mentioned, at least a couple days a week. So we're going to get productivity gains, but we're also going to get profitability gains longer term.
So all positive signs you point to there. Tom Gimbel, in the pandemic here, we've seen 2 million women and 1.5 million men dropping out of the labor force. How did the pandemic specifically affect the ability of women to be in the workforce?
I think it really shows the gender discrimination, quite frankly, that exists in the home. When women were dropping out of the workforce more than men, it probably shows that they take on the majority of the parenting duties. And that is something that we have to talk about as a society that's not as popular to talk about, that it really should be a shared responsibility. Simultaneously, though, it does show that more service jobs, i.e. restaurants, are held by women, and we need to make sure that they have an alternative to do if, in fact, being in a restaurant isn't possible anymore. And that's why we're seeing so many customer service jobs, what's now called customer success and technology jobs, help desk jobs where people can learn and grow in those areas, entry-level accounting. And it's time for people who want to work to be able to work in an office and make that transition. And that's what we're trying to do.
Rebecca Ryan, how about that? What are ways to sort of close this gender gap that we're seeing now between men and women in the workforce?
Well, I think Tom's right about the child care burden falling primarily to the women. But there are other care concerns as well, right? We've got elderly parents. People are living longer than they ever have. So we've got that crunch. So it's the care crunch, right, overall. And I think this raises the specter of a few things. Private sector employers are very innovative. So if they want to bring more women back to work, I think you can expect on-site childcare in some cases, possibly daycare stipends to help with some of those requirements. And overall, most communities, most of the major metropolitan areas have had a daycare shortage generally. So what we've got here is an opportunity for either fast tracking some of those childcare and daycare providers to ease some of the restrictions, increase, the compensation that people can make in those fields, or maybe policy changes.
A lot of work-life improvements, though, might come out of this pandemic. Tom Gimbel, I want to get back to this whole gap between the jobs that are available out there and people with the skills and the wherewithal to do them. You see immigration obviously is a sore subject for both parties. There's not a lot of progress on that. So what are the solutions here to closing that gap a little bit?
Well, we've got to make a bigger push on learning and development, and that is across the board, where companies that are really profitable and have a gap, especially at entry-level jobs, where they can train people to come on in and implementing better onboarding and training programs for people. Secondarily is utilizing the community college programs that we have across this country that are really built for training and learning new skills, especially in software, accounting, IT, things along those lines. There is opportunity. The challenge that we face is that we just live in a time where people expect and are feeling entitled to get something. And, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years ago, people did whatever they had to do to get their foot in the door. And we've lost that, where everybody's 1 degree away from somebody who's made $1 million on the internet and creating an app. And they don't want to put in the hard work. And a lot of times that's what it takes to gain an opportunity and to make a transition into a new career.
I should bookend that by saying I started here at WTTW 16 years ago as an intern. So So it can pay off to be patient and to get in at the ground level. All right, interesting few months ahead for both of you. Our thanks to Rebecca Ryan and Tom Gimbel for joining us.
Thanks, Paris.
Thank you.
Up next, we meet some of the vendors behind this season's Logan Square Farmers Market. So please stay with us.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. What do you believe prevents a strong coalition of Black and Latino communities forming across the communities?
I want us to, as a nation, to find a way to come together.
Go down the block, get it from someone local, and keep the money in the community.
Black joy and the Black experience is magical.
And there's much more ahead on the show, including a look at local efforts to ease the spread of COVID-19 in India. But first, located on the northwest side of Chicago, the Logan Square Farmers Market is one of the city's only weekly, nearly year-round farmers markets. Started in 2005, the outdoor food market is now providing a much-needed extra revenue stream for restaurants struggling during the COVID-19 shutdown. Chicago Tonight's Evan Garcia took a trip to Logan Square to meet some of this year's vendors and to see fresh plans for the future location of the farmers market.
We all get on the table and start dividing the dough and then shaping it. And once it's shaped, it'll rest in its shaped form overnight. And then in the morning, we start all over again.
Jess Galley is the head baker at Bungalow by Middlebrow, a brew pub located in the Logan Square neighborhood. 1 year ago, that restaurant expanded its bread baking operations to The Plant, a business complex in the back of the yards.
During COVID, demand for our bread grew so much that we needed more space, so we opened up that space. There's 3 different deliveries throughout the day from our space at The Plant to Bungalow here.
This year, Bungalow by Middlebrow will be selling its bread and other homemade products at the Logan Square Farmers Market, an open-air food market started 16 years ago. Restaurant owner Pete Turnez says the opportunity helps expand his customer base.
Someone from Rogers Park comes down and grabs a loaf of our bread at the Logan Square Farmers Market, and then suddenly they want to come to our restaurant, hopefully, and try our pizza. These markets are critical, and Logan Square in particular, it's a terrific market and really draws from the entire city.
So here on Logan Boulevard, between Milwaukee and Whipple, you can see anywhere between 40 to 53 vendors every Sunday that range from farmers to bakers and produce vendors.
Nilda Esparza is the executive director of the Logan Square Chamber of Commerce, the head organizer of the farmers market, which runs nearly year-round.
We only have about a 5 to 6 week break throughout the year. After October, we bring it indoors. It is a different location every winter, and we run through March.
As part of a radical redesign of the Logan Square traffic circle, this stretch of Kedzie Avenue will be turned into a pedestrian plaza, eventually the permanent home of the Logan Square Farmers Market.
Aesthetically wise, that whole circle there is going to get a whole new look. And so for us, it's just a nice implementation to have a new home where we will have storage space to store our items every week, but definitely be able to accommodate more vendors on a weekly basis.
Mozzarella, tomato, and fresh basil. Margherita.
Yes.
The farmers market's vendors come from across Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Letizia Serrano, owner of Letizia's Natural Bakery in Chicago's Westtown neighborhood, says she's been involved in the Logan Square Farmers Market for 10 years now.
First of all, I love the market. And we went over there offering our natural product, the baking, but also the fresh pasta.
Serrano says the sweet treats she'll sell outside at the farmers market will be a welcome indulgence after a difficult year.
I think yes, that the people is also stressed out and tired to be home, don't come to the restaurant, so they're going to come happily to the market. I love the market. I love the market. Remind me the feeling of Italy, the feeling of people free.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Evan Garcia.
COVID-19 didn't stop the Logan Square Farmers Market last year. The market began in June, a month later than normal, but continued through the fall. Plus, an indoor winter season at the venue Rockwell on the river. You can visit the Logan Square Farmers Market or the Logan Square Market every Sunday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. The first hour is reserved for high-risk individuals to shop. You can visit our website to learn more. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, the city is investing big in the former Michael Reese site. Find out how, plus other business news from Cranes. Is television still a vast wasteland? We check in with former FCC chairman about the state of television and media. And efforts from local Chicagoans to provide relief for people in India amid the country's devastating COVID-19 outbreak. But first, some more of today's top stories. Illinois public health officials report 1,400 new cases of the coronavirus and 12 additional deaths. The state's total case count is more than 1.356 million, and 22,235 people have died. Nearly 35.5% of the state's population has been fully vaccinated. Bikers, joggers, and pedestrians who enjoy traveling along the lakefront can finally have access to the Navy Pier flyover 7 years after the city broke ground.
It's done, right? It's taken a while, but we did it as funding became available, and we never gave up. We kept pushing forward, and here we are. It's finally done. Chicago works, and this is an example of how we get work done.
The targeted completion date for the flyover was 3 years ago, but today, city and state officials finally cut the ribbon on the $64 million project. The flyover features fully separated paths for cyclists and pedestrians, much of it on a new cantilevered structure running alongside Lower Lakeshore Drive. Among the many delays were unexpected maintenance on the bridge and tunneling out 2 bridge houses on a northbound portion of the trail. There's more of this story on our website. And now to Paris for some of today's top business headlines. Paris.
Thanks, Brandis. COVID vaccinations will soon be offered at a downtown office building near you. Rush University and BMO Financial Group team up to help improve health disparities in the region, and the new Michael Reese site gets a financial boost from the city. Here to go behind the headlines is Crane's Chicago business reporter Danny Ecker. Danny, good to see you with that first story. So we're going to have some free vaccine clinics set up at office buildings around downtown. Tell us which buildings and what the overarching purpose is here.
Yeah, so there's some high-profile buildings, the Merchandise Mart, the Wrigley Building, 150 North Riverside, 311 South Wacker. You know, the first goal here is giving people more options for places to get vaccinated. Obviously, a lot of people in the area have gotten their shots, but you know, the pace has been slowing down recently, and so the state's partnering with building owners to try to address that. And then the second, which is probably just as important of a goal, is the city is trying to get people back downtown again. You know, this is something they need to rekindle the vibrancy of the city. And, you know, if offering free vaccine clinics will help do it, then they're all about it, because we're still at just 35% of the state's population that's vaccinated. And, you know, the vaccination pace is slowed down.
All right, so another way to lure people back downtown in addition to closing down State Street and other things like that. All right, to your other story, BMO donating $10 million to create the Rush BMO Institute for Health Equity. What will this institute be all about?
Well, it's effectively seed money for an institute that hopefully will raise $70 million, according to Rush, to address a few things: structural racism and expanding community-based research, using data to influence public policy. The impetus for all of this is that someone living in an affluent downtown neighborhood like Streeterville has a life expectancy that is 30 years longer than someone in a poor neighborhood like Englewood. So that's been highlighted by the pandemic really in a lot of ways, and BMO and Rush are trying to use this institute to address that, addressing social factors that impact health, like food insecurity and education and workforce development. These are the things that be focal points for this institute.
Huge societal problems, obviously. We'll see if this can put a dent in that. All right, finally, another investment from the city, $60 million from the city budget to fund some infrastructure upgrades around the old Michael Reese Hospital site. So remind us what the plans for that site are and what the city money is going to fund.
Right, so this plan is for a $3.8 billion mixed-use campus just south of McCormick Place that would be built out over the next 10 to 15, maybe even 20 years. It would be anchored by a big medical research center run by the largest hospital in Israel. And remember, the city owns this land. This is the land that the city bought in 2009, which they were hoping would become an Olympic village had the city won the Chicago the Olympic Games in 2016. It's just been sitting empty, and the city's paying $13 million a year for debt service. So it's going to be a tough thing. And so this is basically the city is going to be, it's unclear where the money's going to be coming from at this point, but it could be a bond, it could be current infrastructure money, it could even be federal funds that are used to build new roads to make this happen.
So many planned developments in the South Loop and then all across the city, these big major developments. We'll see if those all come to fruition over the next several years. All right, Danny, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
And now to Brandis and the anniversary of an iconic speech about American television. Brandis.
Paris, thank you. Television is a vast wasteland. That is how then Federal Communications Commission Chair Newton Minow characterized the state of television 6 decades ago. During his speech on May 9th, 1961, Minow advocated for television that served the public's interest, criticizing programming for its blood, gore, and boredom, and its potential impact on children. 60 years later, television has expanded from 3 commercial networks to seemingly unlimited channels delivered in brand new ways. This comes alongside the rise of social media and amid heightened distrust in the news media. Joining us to discuss the current state of television is Newton Minow himself, an advocate for educational television and champion of public service media. He's senior counsel at Sidley Austin and a member emeritus of the WTTW Board of Trustees. Newton Minow, thank you so much for joining us, of course, and welcome to your daughter, Nell Minow, who joins us sitting behind you as well.
Glad to be with you, Brandis.
So it has been 6 decades since that speech. Did you anticipate that your words would carry so much weight 60 years later?
Oh, I had no idea. It's amazing to me that 6 decades later, but I think the issues persist. And I think the issues for the next generation are the government's role in social media. I think the keeping broadcasters serving the public interest, being fair in reporting the news, deciding what is a fact, that's the most important thing, not mixing fact with opinion, those questions remain. I think children's television has improved enormously, and I'm particularly proud to have played a role in getting Sesame Street started.
Yes, and I want to come back to both of those things that you just mentioned, both Sesame Street, but also the fact versus opinion debate. But at the time, television was, groundbreaking technology. It was growing in popularity then. What was the reaction from the public, but also from those within the television industry?
Well, the people in the industry didn't like it at all. But in fact, the producer and writer of Gilligan's Island was so irritated with me that he named the sinking ship the SS Minow in Gilligan's Island. And we later had a wonderful correspondence about it. The reaction of the general public, particularly by parents of small children, was overwhelmingly possible.
And you were also involved in the launch of WETA, that broadcasts, of course, PBS NewsHour. You were instrumental, as you said, in the creation of Sesame Street. What made public television, which was at the time called educational television, what made that part of the solution to the problem then?
Well, I went to the FCC from Chicago. President Kennedy went to the White House from Boston. Both of us were familiar with what was called educational television. Chicago had WTTW, Boston had WGBH, and we were astonished to find no such station in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, no such station in New York, the nation's at that time biggest city, no such station in Los Angeles. And we determined to enlarge the number of channels and to make available opportunities to create what we now call public television. There are now 350 public television stations united into PBS across the nation.
Some might say that we are living in sort of a golden age of television. We have so many streaming services and offerings. There is a lot of television to be consumed right now. But what would you say about the state of television now? Is it still a vast wasteland?
Well, there's a lot of truth in that. And we did succeed in one thing, and that was to enlarge choice for the viewer. If you're a sports junkie, you've got sports if you want 24 hours a day. You're a news junkie, you've got news. If you like old movies, as I do, you can find a station with old movie. So we've enlarged choice. And at the same time, I think, we have a serious problem in our news reporting, where facts and opinion are mixed up together, where we no longer have an agreement on what is a fact.
Let's get into that a little bit more. What is the antidote to disagreements on what is fact and what is opinion?
Well, we have people who say we have alternative facts and make up the facts. If you don't agree on facts, I don't see how you can have a civilized discussion. Pat Moynihan, who I knew as a young person and later he became a senator, he put it all in one sentence. He said, this is a free country, and everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but not to their own facts. And it seems to me today that's a very critical issue in news reporting.
If you were FCC chair.
TTW, I'm proud to say, never mixes opinion and facts. They label when it is an opinion, and they are always on truth on the facts.
Thank you, Mr. Minow, and that's something that we all work here to do. If you were the chair of the FCC today, are there policies, steps that you would take to remedy that problem?
I would go back to what we then had, what was called the fairness doctrine, which encouraged broadcasters to cover controversial issues, but to provide balances of opinion, and balances of not just presenting one point of view, but to, in fairness, to provide different points of view so that the viewer can make up his or her own mind.
How would you say social media and the proliferation of media itself has impacted the current state of television?
Well, I think young people, many of them don't even have a television set. They watch streaming. I see that in my grandchildren. So I think the technology moves so quickly. It moves faster than public policy. In the future, what I'm concerned about just a minute. It's artificial intelligence, where they can take a person's picture, put words in the person's mouth, and they're different words than the person said. They can change the position of a person's face. All this is technologically possible today, and we have to have policies for artificial intelligence so that the viewer still gets the straight truth.
You and our former colleague here at Chicago Tonight, Carol Maureen, of course, you've known each other for years. She says that your wife, Jo, likes to keep you humble, particularly about this speech. How has your wife, Jo, helped to ground you over the years?
My wife and I have had a wonderful, happy marriage. This month will be our 72nd wedding anniversary. We've produced 3 great daughters and have a simply marvelous family. And my wife has a terrific sense of humor and keeps me grounded in everything I do.
Well, congratulations on those 72 years of marriage. Mr. Minow, WTTW News trustee, former chair Jim Mabie. We know that he passed away recently, serving as a trustee here for more than 20 years. He was also a champion for public media. What impact would you say he made on WTTW?
Jim, I was so shocked and saddened to learn of his passing today. Jim and I were very good friends. We worked together for years. He was not only the chairman of TTW, he was also the chairman of WBEZ, the public radio station in Chicago. He was devoted to the public interest. He cared about the independent news gathering, and he was a model citizen who was devoted to bringing the arts, music, art to Chicago. He couldn't have been a better American or better citizen in Chicago.
And our condolences, and of course we'll have more on Jim's legacy later on in the program. But while we've still got you, the Chicago Tribune's ownership is currently in flux with hedge fund Alden Global, but reporters are pushing back Mr. Minow, what are your thoughts on the impact that this could all have on local news in Chicago?
Well, I love newspapers. In fact, I've been a member of the board of directors of the Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Sun-Times, the Chicago Daily News, and I see, sadly, that newspapers are in big trouble. The newspaper is essential in a democracy as a guardian of, for the public, of being a critic or supporter, whatever is appropriate of the government. Mostly, it's got to be a watchdog of the government. So I pray for the Tribune and the Sun-Times and all newspapers to continue, but I worry that the technological revolution has created the printed newspaper into a terrible, terrible corner.
And lastly, Mr. Minow, the speech, obviously, that we're noticing the anniversary of right now, is this what you would like to be remembered by, or your many other accomplishments as well?
If I could be remembered for one thing, I would hope it would be for helping to build the public broadcasting service in America. I'm very, very proud of that.
All right, our thanks.
I'm even more proud of my family.
I'm sure you are, and congrats on your family as well. Our thanks to Newton Minow. It's a privilege to have you here for joining us. Thank you so much.
Candace, thank you.
And now to Paris for details about local efforts to help fight COVID-19 in India. Paris.
Always good to hear from Newton Minow, a certain North Star for all of us here, Brandis. And India, as you mentioned, is going through a massive COVID-19 outbreak, fueled in part by the spread of a highly contagious variant of the disease. This past Saturday, the country reported its highest daily death toll from COVID, 4,187 people, all in one day. Here in Chicago, some groups are working with overseas organizations to donate supplies and relief funds. And joining us to hear more are Santosh Kumar, the Executive Director of the Metropolitan Asian Family Services, and Dr. Sajal Tanna, an infectious disease specialist with Northwestern Medicine. Welcome, both of you, to Chicago tonight. Both of you, as with many in the Chicago area, have family in India. Starting with you, Santosh Kumar, how is this hit close to home for you?
Namaste to all of you, first of all. I am Santosh Kumar from Metropolitan Asian Family Services. I'm here for last 4 decades. And I'm serving our community for last 30 years for Metropolitan Asian Family Services and Universal Metro Services, and we are serving the senior population. And for personally, as you asked, my family is in very much danger. I have lost 4 or 5 people already, and right now 4 people are in the hospital in a very critical condition because of the lack of the oxygen there. So India is a very heavily populated, densely populated country. And this pandemic is taking a toll on the very high number of the people. As you know, the statistics, it is spreading exponentially, where 300, 400,000 people in a day it is infecting. And yeah,
it's certainly an apocalyptic situation right now. Dr. Sajal Tanna, before we get to some of the issues behind this, how about your own personal feelings about what's happening? Has this hit close home to you as well?
Yes, I'm an infectious diseases physician over at Northwestern who's been taking care of COVID patients, but both of my parents are both originally from India. Almost all of their siblings are still there, and our family as well has been very hard hit. Most of my relatives have been lucky enough to stay at home, but at the same time, we've lost some close family friends and extended family members to this disease.
All right, Santosh Kumar, what are some of the efforts, at least in the Chicago area, that are underway now to sort of help the situation over there?
Chicago, we are trying here in many avenues. Like Seva International, we have collected $8 million and sending the oxygen and the vaccines and other PPEs, stuff for the hospitals to the people, and they have thousands of volunteers. They are working there, and then we have a Red Cross India. We are helping them through different organizations like a FIA Chicago, and then we have a private people, doctors, engineers. They are sending, and like a Mall of India also sending, and many people are sending to that. But it is not enough for India kind of population. I urge the world community to help India right now, to stop the spending right now. If we fail to stop right now, then it will spread the whole world, because this is a very dangerous mutant has come. It is spread like in the air, and if go to the, and it doesn't know the border. It crossed the border anytime.
And you mentioned it's a very dangerous new variant. Dr. Tanna, this is a very complex question, but what exactly caused the current outbreak in India, and how dangerous is that variant that's spreading right now?
Sure. I think that the current outbreak is multifactorial. It's been caused in February. India was really a success story, and things had opened up. People were having social gatherings, people were having weddings, religious events. The variant began to spread. It's commonly known as the double mutant variant, which is a bit of a misnomer, but it has two predominant mutations. One is the one that's found in the variant from California, which makes it more infective or more easily transmissible. And then it also has what we call the EEK, or the E484K variant in the same location. That one seems to evade neutralizing antibody, as we've seen in the variant that originated in Brazil, the P1 variant, and also the one that originated in South Africa, the B1351 variant.
So India went from a model country on coronavirus to the situation it's in right now. Santosh Kumar, there's been a lot made of the low rate of vaccination there. Only 10% of the population with one dose, 2% fully vaccinated. India is known to have to be pretty advanced in terms of the medical industry and coming up with things like medical products and vaccines. How come it is lagging here?
It's lagging because of the thing they have a lot of very good pharmacy system there, but they need the raw material, which I think Biden government has stopped for a while. That is causing a delay in the vaccination. Otherwise, India has helped 30 countries. They have sent free vaccination to all these 30 countries before, when the first wave was there. But now they are lagging because the world community is not helping in the raw material.
So perhaps helping out with that, sending more vaccines. Dr. Tanna, Santosh Kumar mentioned the oxygen supply for patients in hospitals right now. What can be done about that crisis, a crisis of an oxygen shortage?
Yeah, so there has been a gift waiver for oxygen concentrators that can be sent abroad, which is great. That removes some of the ambient nitrogen from the air and makes the oxygen more purified for patients who are sick and that need it. People need oxygen. They have not enough oxygen cylinders. They don't have enough oxygen to fill them up. They don't have enough ventilators, and they don't have enough staff healthcare resources, healthcare workers to actually run the ventilators.
And Dr. Tanna, we had a debate on this show about the prospect of relaxing or suspending vaccine patents. Would that help the situation in India by suspending those patents, as President Biden now supports?
Absolutely. I think prioritizing people over patents is very key in decreasing the disparity between the rich and the poor countries. The Biden administration has made a major first step in saying that they support the World Trade Organization in getting rid of these patent or waiving the patent rights. But this isn't going to happen overnight, and we're not going to be able to vaccinate our way out of this surge. And so really sending relief and aid, like Santosh Kumar mentioned, is really going to be key in helping the people of India before they lose even more lives.
Certainly seems like the only solution here is a worldwide solution. And our thanks to Santosh Kumar and Dr. Sajal Tanna. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're back with more, but first we take a look at the weather.
Before we go tonight, a personal note about an important member of the WTTW family. As we mentioned earlier in the hour, Jim Mabie, who served for 20 years on the WTTW WFMT board and was its chair from 2014 to 2020, died over the weekend. Jim was passionate about our organization and was a tireless advocate for our continued growth and success. He was particularly interested in making sure WTTW News could expand to better serve Chicago's diverse communities in increasingly deeper ways. In an interview last year, Jim told us why he wanted to be a part of this organization.
Public broadcasting is essential to democracy and essential to the independent bringing of news and information and opinions to the everyday person.
Our sister station, WFMT, benefited from his appreciation for everything from classical to folk music. Among his many other philanthropic endeavors, Jim once served as the chairman of the WBEZ board. Mabie's first job was with Marshall Fields, and then he went on to spend most of his business career in leadership and portfolio management positions with William Blair and A.G. Becker, and most recently as chair of Chicago Capitol. We thank Jim Mabie for his staunch support of WTTW and WFMT, and in particular for his steadfast support of Chicago Tonight. Our thoughts tonight go out to Jim's wife, Kay, and their children, Sarah, David, Martha, and Ann, as well as the rest of Jim's many friends and family. Jim Mabie was 85. And that is our show for this Monday night.
Please join us tomorrow night live at 7.
Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great night.
Closed captioning for this program is brought to you by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, serving Chicago as a personal injury law firm since 1984.